The Senate will come to order. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Juarez, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock, Hinojosa, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, King, Colcourse, La Mantilla, Menendez, Middleton, Miles, Nichols, Parker, Paxton, Perry, Schwartner, Sparks, Springer, West, Whitmire, Zaffarini.
A quorum is present. Please rise for the invocation to be delivered by Pastor Tim Webb of Champion Fellowship in Brenham.
Thank you. Let us pray. Dear Lord, by your holy word, you have declared that all governments have been established by God for the purposes of rewarding those who do good, to be an avenger bringing wrath on those who practice evil. For Lord, according to your divine word, we have been told what is expected of us and what you require of us, to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly before the Lord. May you grant to this assembly your divine wisdom, discernment, and courage to do what is right in the eyes of God for the benefit of the people. For one day they will all give an account for how they stewarded their responsibility of governing. May they trust in the Lord with all their heart and lean not on their own understanding, but in all their ways may they acknowledge you. And you, O Lord, will make their paths straight. May you grant this assembly the courage to stand for truth, and may we work diligently to unite our state at a time when there are those who are passionately trying to divide us. And finally, may you grant them peace and comfort along the way so that they may stand strong. I pray all of this in the name of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Webb. The Dean of the Senate moves to dispense of the reading of yesterday's journal. Is there an objection? The chair hears none. The motion is adopted. Mr. Doorkeeper,
Mr. President, there's a message from the House.
admit the messenger.
Mr. President, I'm directed by the House to inform the Senate that the House has taken the following action. The House has passed the following measures. HB 18 by Slauson, relating to the protection of minors from harmful.
Looks like you have some mixed colors there. Members, if there are no objections, I would like to postpone the reading and referral of bills until the end of today's session. Is there an objection? The chair hears none. The reading and referral of bills is postponed. Senator Springer. Members, that concludes the morning call. Senator Springer, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 577.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 577. Despite existing regulations from the Texas Department of Health Services and the FDA, local health departments often pile on their own redundant and inconsistent regulations. This regulatory patchwork of local health departments can create confusion and require restaurants to pay for duplicitous permits that can become costly to small businesses. This bill reduces redundant restaurant regulations by removing duplicitous license and health safety requirements. The committee substitute did take out the noise issues, which was the primary thing we heard. And with that, I move to suspend the regular order of business.
Senator Springer moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 577. Secretary will read this caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 577 relating to regulation of food service establishments, retail food stores, mobile food units, roadside food vendors, temporary food service establishment, and food managers.
Senator Springer, you recognized for a motion.
I move committee substitute Senate Bill 577 to engrossment.
Senator Springer moves passage to engrossment, Senate Bill 577. Is there an objection? Chair hears none. Senate Bill 577 is passed to engrossment. Senator Springer, you're now recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
That's my motion.
Senator Springer moves suspension of the 3-day rule. So Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 29 ayes and 2 nays, the rules are suspended. The chair now lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 577. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 577 relating to the regulation of food service establishments.
Senator Springer, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage committee substitute to Senate Bill 577.
Senator Springer moves final passage Senate Bill 577. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Waters.
There being 29 ayes and 2 nays, Senate Bill 577 is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Eckhart.
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Senator Eckhart to introduce the Doctor of the Day.
Members of the Chamber, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you my friend and constituent, Dr. Dana Sprout, who is a board-certified family medicine doctor with Ascension Seton in Austin, Texas. She earned her master's in public health from the University of California, Los Angeles, and her medical degree from the University of Texas Health Center at San Antonio. And let me pause for a moment. I just had a cap put on my tooth, so if I'm slurring my speech, it's not because I'm drunk before noon. Dr. Sprout has also completed a family medicine faculty development fellowship at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and the National Institute of Program Director Development, sponsored by the American Academy of Family Physicians, Society of Teachers of Family Medicine, and Association of Family Medicine Residency Doctors. Additionally, she dedicates her time to a number of committees and boards in our community, including Texas Medical Association Council on Medical Education, Texas Academy of Family Physicians Commission on Academic Affairs and Commission on Public Health, Public Health Clinical Affairs and Research, Texas Health Action Board of Directors, Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board Family Practice Advisory Committee, and the Dell Medical School Faculty Senate. Dr. Sprout is currently an associate professor at the UT Austin Dell Medical School and director of their Family Medicine Residency Program. There, she's been recognized for her outstanding performance, receiving the Dell Medical School Excellence in Teaching Award in 2019 and Academy of Distinguished Educators in 2017, among many other accolades from the Texas Medical Association and Academy of Family Physicians. Thank you so much, Dr. Sprout, for all your service to our capital community and to the larger community of Texas. Your immense dedication to sharing your knowledge with us and with our UT Medical students is deeply appreciated. And members, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sprout.
The chair recognizes Senator Middleton for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, today in the gallery above us, we have the Texas City Lamarck Chamber of Commerce Leadership Mainland class. If y'all could please stand. The mission of Leadership Mainland is to identify and assist citizens who want to learn more about the challenges facing their community and to train, educate, and motivate key employees for future leadership roles in their communities in the great state of Texas. And this is the future of our Gulf Coast economy right here with us today. And it's my honor to have you join us and join your state senate and your state capitol. So thank y'all for coming today, and I'm proud to get to recognize y'all.
Senator LaMantia. Senator LaMantia, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1592.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1592. Members, this bill was voted out of Health and Human Services Committee unanimously and will add a designated seat on the Radiation Advisory Board for licensed veterinarians. The Radiation Advisory Board examines the state's radiation policies, programs, and proposed rules and provides technical advice necessary for the use, regulation, and development of radiation sources. The board currently consists of 18 members with a wide variety of industries and professions, including human healthcare specialists, radiation, nuclear medicine, and dentistry. Veterinarians also use radiation to diagnose and treat their patients, but do not hold a designated seat on the board. This bill will allow veterinarians to provide their valuable insights on radiation policy in Texas. Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business.
Senator LaMantia moves suspension of the regular order of business. Is there an objection? Chair hears none. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1592. The Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1592 relating to the composition of the Radiation Advisory Board.
Senator LaMantia, you are recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Senator LaMantia moves passage to engrossment. Is there an objection? Chair hears none. Senate Bill 1592 is passed to engrossment. Senator LaMantia, you are now recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional three-day rule.
So moved.
Senator LaMantia moves suspension of the three-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
There being 30 ayes and 1 nay, the rules are suspended. The chair now lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1592. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1592 relating to the composition of the Radiation Advisory Board.
Senator LaMantia, you are recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Senator LaMantia moves final passage Senate Bill 1592. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 30 ayes and 1 nay, Senate Bill 1592 finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members.
Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1884. Senator Flores, are you ready? Senator Hinojosa, we'll get to you soon. Senator Flores, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1884.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider committee substitute for Senate Bill 1884. Congress passed the United States Northern Triangle Enhanced Engagement Act in 2020, which requires the U.S. Department of State to provide an annual report. It's called the Engel List on corrupt and undemocratic actors in the Northern Triangle countries. This report is used to hold corrupt actors accountable with sanctions such as asset freezing and denying visas. With foreign corruption spilling over into Texas, especially from our southern border, Texas can and should create its own version of the Engel List, one that is focused on tracking and monitoring corrupt and dangerous actors doing business in Texas. Committee Substitute 1884 will establish such a list by requiring the Secretary of State's office to post a report on its website identifying foreign nationals who have engaged in actions that undermine the security and sovereignty of the state or in significant corruption in their own home country. Sanctions can then be imposed on an individual or affiliated entity by denying an application for or revoking any business registration obtained to do business in this state, prohibiting contracts with state agencies, and prohibiting attendance in public institutions of higher education. It does provide for the Secretary of State to notify a person that will be on this annual report and to establish a procedure for an individual who seeks expungement of their name from the report. This report will be powerful simply for the attention it brings to corrupt actors and can truly be a dynamic and impactful means to fight corruption. I move suspension of the Senate's regular order of business.
Senator Flores moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1884. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez.
There being 21 ayes and 10 nays, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1884. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee Substitute, Senate Bill 1884, relating to identification of and sanctions against certain foreign actors.
Senator Flores, you're recognized for a motion. Members, we have an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment Number 1 by Hinojosa.
Now you're recognized, Senator Hinojosa, on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. And my amendment will remove the phrase criminal activity on page 1, lines 43, 44, which quite frankly is overly broad. And I've discussed this with Senator Flores, and it narrows it down to specific crimes of engaging in or aiding and abetting drug trafficking, human trafficking, and corruption across the Texas-Mexico border. And it's really a much more targeted bill to deal with those issues and crimes across the border, and I think is acceptable to the author.
Senator Flores on the amendment.
Thank you, Senator Hinojosa. Thank you very much for bringing this amendment. Your knowledge and on this topic and your engagement in securing our Texas is highly commendable and something I respect. Your amendment is a very good one and adds a lot more to this bill, and so it is acceptable to the author.
Members, the questions on the adoption of the amendment. Is there an objection? The chair hears none. The amendment's adopted. Senator Flores, you're now recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Flores moves passage to engrossment on Senate Bill 1884. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez.
There being 21 ayes and 10 nays, Senate Bill 1884 is passed to engrossment. We'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members.
Chair lays out the following resolution. The Secretary will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 476 by Johnson et al., commending the Dallas Wings organization for its contributions to the community.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I have the pleasure of introducing to you Dallas's own and Texas's only WNBA team, the Dallas Wings. I have here present with us Greg Bibb, the president and CEO and partner at the Dallas Wings, their head coach, Latricia Trammell, LaDondra Wilson, who is vice president of social responsibility for the Dallas Wings. She's also the executive director of the Dallas Wings Community Foundation, Veronica Burton, our point guard for the Dallas Wings, and our newest recruit from France, Lou Lopez Senechal, the newest player on the team, just drafted last week. Want to welcome her to Texas, certainly. I welcome all of you to Austin. A little bit about the Dallas Wings. They came here in 2016. They brought an exciting brand of basketball to the North Texas community, but also have demonstrated a profound commitment to serving the community. They do all kinds of things, a whole range of activities and initiatives. I want to read to you just a couple of them. They do place an emphasis on helping young girls and women through a whole range of initiatives, but broader than that, they have... They've contributed to athletics and other school programs, but in addition to supporting youth sports, they've helped in health awareness, education, and they've partnered with the Count It Coalition to encourage greater public engagement in elections and to increase voter access and participation. So, members, this is an example of the kind of sports teams we want here in Texas. They're professional, excellent athletes that inspire us and give us something to look forward to, and they participate in our communities, which is also critically important. So, members, please welcome the Dallas Wings to our floor here.
Is there an objection to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The resolution is adopted. Senator Johnson, I will remind you they play in my district. They do play basketball in my district, just to clarify. Senator Flores. Senator Flores, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I didn't get the light there. There it goes. So moved, Mr. President.
Senator Flores moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Burwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 25 ayes and 6 nays, the rules are suspended. The chair now lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1884. The secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1884 relating to identification of and sanctions against certain foreign.
Senator Flores, you're recognized for a motion.
I move final passage.
Senator Flores moves final passage Senate Bill 1884. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Burwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
There being 20 ayes and 11 nays, Senate Bill 1884 is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Miles. Senator Miles, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business and take up and consider Senate Bill 2133.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I move to suspend the Senate regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 2133. Some of you may remember Senate Bill 1876 signed into law during the 87th legislative session. Senate Bill 1876 required dialysis facilities to adopt a written emergency pre-readiness operation plan during the declared disasters. One provision of the bill prioritized EMS taking dialysis patients directly to dialysis clinics during the disaster. Before Senate Bill 1876, they were required to take dialysis patients to the hospital. DSHS interpreted the provision to mean that EMS providers had to prioritize dialysis calls over all calls, including emergency calls. Senate Bill 2133 requires EMS providers to adopt and implement a plan for providing alternative modes of transportation to dialysis patients from their home to dialysis centers during a declared disaster. The bill also clarifies that 911 calls made during disasters will have priority over dialysis transport calls. It is agreed language between THA and EMS providers and dialysis centers. I move suspension, Mr. President.
Senator Miles moves suspension of regular order of business on Senate Bill 2133. Is there an objection? Chair hears none. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 2133. The Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2133 relating to emergency planning for the transportation of certain end-stage renal disease facility patients during a declared disaster.
Senator Miles, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move passage of Senate Bill 2133 to engrossment.
Senator Miles moves passage to engrossment. Is there an objection? Chair hears none. Senate Bill 2133 is passed to engrossment. Senator Miles, you're now recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Mr. President, I move to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule. Bills to be read on the third day.
Senator Miles moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 27 ayes and 4 nays, the rules are suspended. The chair now lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 2133. Senator Miles, you're recognized for a motion. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2133 relating to emergency planning for the transportation of certain end-stage renal disease facility patients during a declared disaster.
Senator Miles, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move final passage of Senate Bill 2133.
Senator Miles moves final passage Senate Bill 2133. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
There being 27 ayes and 4 nays, Senate Bill 2133 is finally passed.
Mr. President, I thank you, members as well.
Senator Middleton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1864.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 1864. And Senate Bill 1864, it is an order of placement bill when a child is removed from a home, and what it simply does is it puts the order of placement already in the Family Code in Chapter 262 into Chapter 264. Senate Bill 1864 requires DFPS to give preference of a child's placement starting with 1, person related to the child by blood, marriage, or adoption; 2, person with whom the child has a long-standing and significant relationship; 3, foster home; and finally, general residential option. Since Chapter 264 of the Family Code does not currently contain this language, courts and DFPS have stated that this preferential placement framework is only applicable prior to adversarial hearings. The goal is to ensure the framework of this code in Section 262 is applied to Section 264, and that DFPS is consistent throughout the entire process. Senate Bill 1864 simply mirrors 262-114D, which was added during the 87th regular legislative session. And with that, I move suspension.
Senator Middleton moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1864. Is there an objection? Chair hears none. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1864. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1864 relating to certain placements for children in the conservatorship of the Department of Family and Protective Services.
Senator Middleton, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Middleton moves passage to engrossment. Senate Bill 1864. Is there an objection? Chair hears none. Senate Bill 1864 is passed to engrossment. Senator Middleton, you're now recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move suspension of the constitutional 3-day rule for Senate Bill 1864.
Senator Middleton moves suspension of the 3-day rule regarding Senate Bill 1864. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckert, Flores.
There being 31 ayes and no nays, the rules are suspended. The chair now lays out in third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1864. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1864 relating to certain placements for children in the conservatorship of the Department of Family and Protective Services.
Senator Middleton, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move final passage.
Senator Middleton moves final passage on Senate Bill 1864. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckert, Flores.
There being 31 ayes and no nays, Senate Bill 1864 is finally passed. Senator West, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2591.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I move to suspend the Senate regular order of business, take up and consider the committee substitute Senate Bill 2591. The Relinquishment Avoidance Program grants relief to parents whose children are so out of control, harming their parents, their siblings, themselves, that they need to be removed from the home. This program allows parents to remain in joint managing conservatorship of the state and work very closely with the state on this issue. Last session, I passed Senate Bill 642, and in the interim, learned that as implemented, it failed in stopping the practice of the Department of Family and Protective Service requiring a child abuse or an endangerment investigation prior to the utilization of the Relinquishment Avoidance Program. After continuous and ongoing conversations with the department on how to properly implement the program, I bring forth this bill to realize the legislative intent of the program that we passed last legislative session.
Senator West moves suspension of regular order of business on Senate Bill 2591. Is there an objection? Chair hears none. The rules are suspended. Chair now lays out on second reading Senate Bill 2591. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2591 relating to the appointment of the Department of Family and Protective Services and a child's parent or legal guardian as joint managing conservators for the child.
Senator West, you're recognized for a motion.
Move passage to engrossment.
Senator West moves passage to engrossment. Is there an objection? Chair hears none. Senate Bill 2591 is passed to engrossment. Senator West, you're now recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So move.
Senator West moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
There being 31 ayes and no nays, the rules are suspended. The chair now lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 2591. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2591, relating to the appointment of the Department of Family and Protective Services and a child's parent or legal guardian as joint managing conservators for the child.
Senator West, you recognize for a motion.
Mr. President, I move final passage of Senate Bill 2591.
Senator West moves final passage Senate Bill 2591. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
There being 31 ayes and no nays, Senate Bill 2591 is finally passed. Senator Middleton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2335.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider committee substitute for Senate Bill 2335.
Senator Middleton moves suspension of regular order of business on Senate Bill 2335. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
There being 20 ayes and 11 nays, the rules are suspended. Chair now lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 2335. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2335, relating to the accreditation of public institutions of higher education.
Senator Middleton, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move final passage for committee substitute Senate Bill 2335.
Senator Middleton moves final passage Senate Bill 2335. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Florida, Gutierrez, Hall, Hancock.
There being 20 ayes and 11 nays, Senate Bill 2335 is finally passed.
Senator Paxton, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1098.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1098. A constituent brought me the idea for Senate Bill 1098 to help prevent other families from having to receive the heartbreaking news that their precious child has been harmed in their child care facility. Members, child care facilities are already required by rule to make certain information and access available to parents of children in their care, such as the facility's policies and procedures and their written records concerning that child. Senate Bill 1098 codifies some of these current requirements, and it additionally requires that parents must have access to any existing video footage of the child in cases of suspected abuse or neglect, only if such footage exists. Senate Bill 1098 does not require videotaping by the facilities. This bill recognizes that parents deserve to have transparency regarding the care of their child, and it ensures that child care facilities recognize parents' rights to any information pertaining to the care of their child while protecting the privacy of other children's information. I move to suspend.
Senator West, what purpose?
Just a question of the author.
Do you yield?
I do.
Senator Paxton, this deals with child care centers, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And let's have a conversation about it. In many instances, these relationships.
Members, can we have some order and behind the brass rail as well, order on the floor so we can hear? And Senator West, I need for you to keep that mic up and speak up a little bit.
How's that? Is that
There you
okay?
go. That's much better. And same thing for you, Senator Paxton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In many instances, these relationships are contractual relationships between parents and a child care center, correct?
That could be the case.
Okay, and so are we mandating that in these contractual relationships that parents have these rights, or is that something that should be subject to contractual bargaining between parents and the child care center?
So this bill takes existing rules that apply to certain child care centers. So it doesn't increase the scope of the rulemaking. It simply applies, these are codified rules that are already applied to certain child care centers.
And I'm trying to figure out which child care centers are we talking about? That's what I couldn't understand. Which ones are we talking about? Which ones are we talking about?
Yes, sir. I want to get some good clarification on that. Mr. President, could I take just a moment to get some clarification so that I can answer Senator West's question accurately? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Senator West, we were discussing the rules, and I appreciate you giving me a chance to kind of address the technical nature of what you were asking. But basically, this is taking the licensing requirements. It's codifying these things. These are things such as providing parents with written policies and procedures, providing parents with any written records concerning their child, taking those things and putting them in statute to make them something that all parents have the right to. So taking existing rulemaking, making those and putting those in statute. And then, as we discussed, it does not make a new requirement that child care facilities that are licensed by the state do video recording, but it does say, now, if that exists and there is an allegation of abuse or neglect, the parents have the right to review that footage. They don't have to subpoena it. They have the right to see that in the event of an allegation.
Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you so much, Senator West.
Motion is on suspension of the rules. Any objection? Hearing none. Rules suspended. Chair lays out second reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1098. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1098 relating to the rights of a parent or guardian with a child in certain child care facilities.
We have an amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 1 by Paxton.
On your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is a technical amendment to correct some drafting errors in the committee substitute, which I discussed in committee. I move adoption of the floor amendment.
Any objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. You recognize passage to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passes to engrossment. You recognize suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
30 ayes, 1 nay. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1098. Secretary will call the roll. Call the roll.
Committee substitute.
Read the caption. I'm sorry.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1098 relating to the rights of a parent or guardian with a child in certain child care facilities.
Now you can move.
Kind of on autopilot there.
Yes.
So, thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Secretary now will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
30 ayes, 1 nay. The bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Birdwell.
Senator Betancourt, you recognize for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider Senate Bill 2069.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Senate Bill 2069 is an attempt to reverse a decision that TEA made about not providing signs on a bill that Senator Taylor passed 1831 back in the last session. The legislation we talked about yesterday would bring the private schools out of this at this point because the signs are not being provided for free. But we have a very good amendment from TASB that Senator Johnson is going to amend here in a second. So I hope everyone will consider voting for Senate Bill 2069. I move suspension of the regular order of business, take up and consider Senate Bill 2069.
Members, Senator Betancourt moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2069. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
Having 21 ayes and 10 nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 2069. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2069, relating the required posting of signs regarding human trafficking penalties by certain schools.
Members, there is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment Number 1 by Johnson.
Senator Johnson on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. This amendment does not address this question of different treatment for the private and public schools, and I still have some concerns and misgivings about that. However, what's more important to me in this bill is the original purpose of the requirement that our schools place signs regarding human trafficking where they can be viewed. The problem with it as it currently applies to our public school systems is that the prescriptive nature of the requirement has made it so onerous that we have very, very low compliance among our public schools as far as posting these signs goes. We fixed that problem here with this amendment that comes from the Texas Association of School Boards, which does what we should have done in the first place, which simply requires that the signs be placed in a conspicuous place where they are reasonably likely to be viewed by all school employees and visitors. We think this will help further the intent of the original legislation, and my understanding is it is acceptable to the author, but I'll hear from the author.
Senator Betancourt on the amendment.
Senator Johnson, it's absolutely acceptable to the author, and I appreciate your help in cleaning up this problem because we've got problems on both ends of this coin. And the fact that the public schools have this amendment with TASB that will allow them to present these signs at a conspicuous place is acceptable to the author. So I appreciate you bringing it.
Thank you for working with Senator Betancourt.
Okay. Members, the motion is on adoption of amendment number 1 on third reading. The amendment is acceptable to the author. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry. Secretary will call the roll. Requires 2/3. Okay. All right. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none. The amendment is adopted. Senator Betancourt, you recognized for a motion?
Mr. President, I move final passage of Senate Bill 2069.
Members, Senator Betancourt moves final passage, Senate Bill 2069. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell,
There
Creighton.
being 21 ayes and 10 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Betancourt.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Thank you, Senator Johnson.
Senator Zaffarini, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take and consider Senate Bill 2248.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business in order to take up at this time Senate Bill 2248 relating to guardianships for persons who are incapacitated. Members, generally this bill would enhance protections for persons who are incapacitated and under guardianship by providing clear procedures and responsibilities and a set fee for clerks transferring guardianship cases, requiring guardians to meet the conditions of their guardianship before assuming duties, and ensuring the guardianship is concluded fully before a guardian is dismissed. There will be a floor amendment that I will describe at that time. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Members, Senator Zaffarini moves suspension of the regular order of business, Senate Bill 2248. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 2248. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2248 relating to guardianships for persons who are incapacitated.
Members, there is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Zaffarini.
Senator Zaffarini on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members, this is a simple amendment that would change the notice requirements to a qualified delivery method and make this bill consistent with other criminal background checks legislation. Mr. President, I move adoption.
Members, Senator Zaffarini moves adoption. Floor amendment number 1. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none. The amendment is adopted. Senator Zaffarini, you are recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Members, Senator Zaffarini moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none. Bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Zaffarini, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. So moved.
Members, Senator Zaffarini moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell,
There being 31 ayes and no nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 2248. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2248 relating to guardianships for persons who are incapacitated.
Senator Zaffarini, you recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Members, Senator Zaffarini moves final passage Senate Bill 2248. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell,
There being 31 ayes and no nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Zaffarini.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Parker, you recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider Senate Bill 2208.
It is. Let's argue a little bit more.
Thank you, Mr. President. Election crimes carry a great deal of political contention and deserve to be heard in an unbiased venue. In most cases, current law requires election crimes to be prosecuted in the county in which they occur. The concern, however, is that prosecution of election crimes is particularly susceptible to bias due to the power held in those counties by the offices whose elections are being questioned. Yesterday was concerned that this bill is unnecessary as there are already systems in place for the situation. Members, I want to clarify that there is not a system in place for the case this bill seeks to address. It is true that a DA can bring in an outside prosecutor if the originating DA has concern regarding bias. The issue presents itself when we have DAs whose bias leads them to not want the case to be brought at all. In those cases, they will not bring in a special prosecutor. We'd be very happy to have the originating DA prosecute these cases, but when they don't, we need another option. By allowing election crimes to be held in adjoining counties, there is an option for prosecution when DAs refuse to bring up a case. Senate Bill 2208 provides an option for unbiased prosecution in those cases. Mr. President, I move final passage. I move suspension.
Members, Senator Parker moves suspension of the regular order of business. Senate Bill 2208. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
Having
Campbell,
19 ayes
Creighton,
and 12
Flores.
nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays that on third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 2208. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2208, relating the venue for the prosecution of an election offense.
Senator Eckhart, for what purpose?
Speak on the bill, sir.
You're recognized.
Thank you so much. And Senator West, Senator Miles, I want to thank the two of you for your extensive questioning on this bill yesterday, where you exposed this bill for what it actually is, which is venue shopping by prosecutors. This is an outrageous idea that we would promote venue shopping by prosecutors. So let me put this in plain language so anybody outside this chamber will understand what this bill does. What it does is makes it possible for a ambitious district attorney outside of a major metropolitan area to go shopping for election prosecutions in possibly a 5-county region. It's not that they keep their own yard clean. They will be able to go shopping in other counties for cases to make a name for themselves. This is not anything that we should be condoning, much less promoting. But that's what this bill does. It sets ambitious prosecutors hunting in other people's counties for people to prosecute. And for that reason, I am voting no on the bill.
Thank you, Senator Eckhart. Senator West to speak on final passage.
Members, again, this is a solution looking for a problem. The fact of the matter is that prosecutors already exist in these various counties. There's systems currently in place in instances where a prosecutor may be reluctant to take on a case because of its political overtures with or ramifications within that county. You can bring in a special prosecutor. You can invite the Attorney General in. You know exactly what this is all about. What it's about is the Attorney General was turned down by the Court of Criminal Appeals, not once, but twice. And I believe, and I'm not sure, but I believe even the prosecutors testified against this bill. I believe, I'm not certain about that, that's what I heard. And so the reality is that your prosecutors are also against this particular bill. I don't know that I'm going to turn any votes, but I just wanted to make certain that you know exactly what this bill is about. And what you're doing is undermining the district attorneys in your own counties.
Senator Parker, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, I move final passage.
Members, Senator Parker moves final passage, Senate Bill 2208. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
There being
Campbell.
19 ayes and 12 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Parker.
President.
Senator Hancock, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider committee substitute Senate Bill 2209.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to take up and consider Senate Bill 2209.
Members, Senator Hancock moves suspension of the regular order of business, committee substitute Senate Bill 2209. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
There being
Campbell.
21 ayes and 10 nays, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage. Committee substitute Senate Bill 2209. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2209 relating to the disclosure of information in department files of firefighters or police officers and civilian oversight boards in certain municipalities.
Senator Hancock, you're recognized for a motion.
Move final passage.
Members, Senator Hancock moves final passage. Committee substitute Senate Bill 2209. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
There being
Campbell.
21 ayes and 10 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Hancock.
Thank you.
Senator West, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider Senate Bill 1887.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Members, at this time, I move to suspend the Senate regular order business to take up and consider Senate Bill 1887. Senator Creighton, this is the Senate Bill 25, a follow-up bill. This bill follows up on a unanimous bill from the 86th legislative session, which was Senate Bill 25, that authorized students to transfer credits from public two-year institutions to public universities and count towards their degree. We recognize that there was a lot of duplication, and frankly, families were spending a lot of money that they otherwise should not have been required to do. At the request of the Higher Education Coordinating Board, this bill requires early college, high schools, schools to enroll students in degree programs applicable to the workforce or can transfer towards a bachelor's degree. It also delays two reports that were required by Senate Bill 25 by 2 months. It requires reporting for the transfer dispute resolution process. And members, I want y'all to make certain you understand what that process is all about. When there are issues concerning whether or not a class that's been taken in community college should count towards a degree, there's a resolution process, and Senator Creighton and I are going to be looking at that on a going forward basis, and I appreciate that. It clarifies the field of study curricula to better align the statute with best practices. Universities will be authorized to prescribe a limited number of direct electives within the field of study specific to their institutions, which will be published on both the institution and the coordinating board's website. And so, Mr. President, members, I can go on and on, but this is a great bill, and it's going to be helping each and one of our constituents as it relates to reducing the costs of higher education in the state of Texas and hopefully getting our kids out of universities on a more timely basis. I'd move suspension.
Member Senator West moves suspension of the regular order of business, Senate Bill 1887. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1887. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1887, relating the requirements for the early college education program and the transfer of course credit among public institutions of higher education.
Senator West, members, there is an amendment.
The desk where people are. Let's go. Does that work? The following room?
Members, there is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by West.
Senator West on the amendment.
Mr. President, members, this amendment simply implements several clarifying changes requested by the Higher Education Coordinating Board. Nothing substantive changed within the bill itself.
Senator West, we're going to wait till everybody gets the amendment to the back row. Members, Senator West moves adoption of floor amendment number 1. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator West, you're recognized for a motion.
Move passage to engrossment.
Members, Senator West moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator West, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So move.
Members, Senator West moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
Being 31 ayes and no nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1887. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1887, relating the requirements for the early college education program.
Senator West, you're recognized for a motion.
Move passage of Senate Bill 1887 as amended.
Members, Senator West moves final passage Senate Bill 1887. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Blanco.
Being 31 ayes and no nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator West. Senator Creighton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute Senate Bill 2124.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we've discussed public education a great deal this session. The Senate has advanced historic legislation for 6 million students in Texas schools through several different measures. Senate Bill 2124 is another step to prepare our kids in our state for the future. If we really want to be serious about preparing students for a 21st century economy, we must make investments in STEM. Senate Bill 2124 will challenge our students and open the door for them to realize their potential. Students are only placed currently in advanced math if a parent, teacher, or counselor takes action to suggest it. Many students who have competitive math scores remain in regular math classes rather than advanced. Senate Bill 2124 requires districts to automatically place students that show appropriate proficiency in 5th grade math and advanced math courses in middle school. And specifically, districts must adopt policies that allow students to opt out of being placed in advanced math courses when they score in the top 40% of 5th grade math assessments or coursework. Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider committee substitute for Senate Bill 2124.
Member Senator Creighton moves suspension of the regular order of business. Committee substitute Senate Bill 2124. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2124. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2124 relating to an advanced mathematics program for public school students in middle school.
Senator Creighton recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, move passage to engrossment.
Member Senator Creighton moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Creighton, you recognize for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Move to suspend.
Member Senator Creighton moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
There
Bartlett.
being 31 ayes and no nays, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2124. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2124 relating to an advanced mathematics program for public school students in middle school.
Senator Creighton, you recognize for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move final passage committee substitute for Senate Bill 2124.
Member Senator Creighton moves final passage Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2124. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bartlett.
There being 31 ayes and no nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Creighton.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Zaffirini, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2017.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business in order to take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 2017, relating to the regulation of hearing aids and the practices of audiology and the fitting and dispensing of hearing instruments. Members, this bill would align state law with federal law for over-the-counter hearing aids and clarify regulation for hearing instrument fitters and dispensers and for speech-language pathologists and audiologists. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Members, Senator Zaffirini moves suspension of the regular order of business, Senate Bill 2017. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 2017. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2017 relating to the regulation of hearing aids and the practices of audiology.
Senator Zaffirini, you recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Members, Senator Zaffirini moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing and seeing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Zaffirini, you recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. So moved.
Members, Senator Zaffirini moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
Having 30 ayes and 1 nay, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 2017. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2017 relating to the regulation of hearing aids and the practices of audiology.
Senator Zaffirini recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Members, Senator Zaffirini moves final passage Senate Bill 2017. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco,
Having
Campbell.
30 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Zaffirini.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Betancourt, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider committee substitute Senate Bill 1970.
Thank you, Mr. President. Street takeovers have become common occurrence through large cities in Texas. In the city of Houston, arrests have been made almost weekly in 2023 for street and parking lot takeovers. And ABC 13 sorority in Houston found out that in 2022, the DA's office handled 1,000 street racing cases, which resulted in 200 cars being seized. And in Austin in 2023, there was a street takeover, coincidentally right outside Senator Hall's place that he stays, that led to 17 suspects being charged in May. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 1970 makes it clear that criminal conduct involving reckless driving, expedition, or racing on a highway can lead to forfeiture of any vehicle seized as a result of reckless driving, exhibition, or racing on the highway. We will be discussing a floor amendment for Senator Hall that I will be taking up in a conference committee, but not at this time. And with that, I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute for Senate Bill 1970.
Senator Kolkhorst, for what purpose?
To ask the author, the senator, a question or two.
Do you yield, Senator Betancourt?
Certainly.
You're recognized, Senator Kolkhorst.
Senator Betancourt, first I want to thank you for the bill because this is becoming more of a problem in different areas.
I mean, more of a problem, it's almost an epidemic because this is now becoming a cause that's fueled by social media, and these street races occur in major urban areas constantly now on a rotating basis, with some of these gangs moving from one town to the next. And obviously, it's turned into more of a criminal enterprise and a money-making enterprise. that really has gone all across the state.
How do they make money on
part of this
racing?
Is, advertising, secondary bets on the process, social media posts, this is literally an illicit business that's gone viral, for lack of a better description, because it's effectively street racing, gone wild. And there's actually, unfortunately, a television show that's now mirroring this, and it's effectively illegal street racing. So this is something we really got to clamp down on too, because there's too much problems with health and safety. People in the crowd have been killed or injured. This is just not the type of activity that should be happening, outside somebody's window at 12 o'clock at night.
And your enforcement mechanism on this?
The enforcement mechanism is specific, okay? And let me read it to you. It's an expansion of the specific offense of reckless driving exhibition in Penal Code 22.03F. And because the more specific offense of reckless driving contained in the Penal Code, the police can't use the charge of deadly conduct for the basis of asset forfeiture. The problem is these cars are rotated from one area to the next, and that's part of the issue.
Well, I want to thank you for, bringing awareness to this and for the bill, and I look forward to working with you on this process. Again, you keep our neighborhoods and our streets and our highways. I talked to a DPS officer who said, many times they'll lure them in and their cars are so fast that he says, I can just see them going off into the distance.
Unfortunately, some of these cars are so fast they can leave a police cruiser in the rearview mirror. And when you look at it, wherever you have a highway, wherever you have, like Brenham, Giddings, this type of stuff gets exported to small towns out of the urban areas too.
Right. I think there was an incident here in Austin that we saw and things like that.
It was, and it was right outside Senator Hall's place. That's where 17 people were arrested.
Yeah.
It really has to stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Bettencourt.
Thank you, Senator Kolkhorst.
Members, any objection to suspension? Chair hears none. Rules suspended. Chair lays out on second reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1970. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1970 relating to the prosecution of certain criminal conduct involving a reckless driving exhibition or racing on a highway.
The following amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Hall.
Senator Hall, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Bettencourt, as you know, we've talked about this, and I like your bill. It's very similar to one I have, and I agree with Senator Kolkhorst. It is a problem that we need to address. We need to do something about it. My concern simply is that we need to limit taking people's property with conviction. That is, be a criminal forfeiture. In your bill, we talk about a civil asset forfeiture, and civil asset forfeiture is not the proper way to deprive people of their property. It is used to take property without due process of proving guilt, that they've actually done something, whereas criminal asset forfeiture takes place when they have used something to commit a crime. So in this case, we could have the person's vehicle actually being taken just because they were arrested. It happens all the time out there. And I don't think that's the proper way to do this. I really think that it ought to be a criminal asset forfeiture instead of civil. But I understand what you're trying to work with, and I appreciate working with you on this. And I think this is something we probably work out as it moves through the system, as it moves forward. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the amendment down, and we'll work on it later.
No, and thank you, Senator Hall, because this is the problem with these situations is when you're looking at criminal versus civil, this gets a little more complex than we have time to resolve right now on the floor. And so I'm expecting there'd be a conference committee to have that discussion, because you're really bringing up a wider issue, but an important one that we need to discuss in the future. So thanks for bringing that to at least the attention of this bill author, because my intent was like yours. I was trying to stop those criminal gangs outside your place here in Austin that were lighting up, I think, every night at 12:30, or was like on clockwork, right?
Oh yeah, no, I want to see it come to an end, but I want us to follow proper procedures and do it when they're proven guilty.
Right, and thank you so much. So we'll look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you, Senator. Okay. With that, Mr. President, I will pull down the amendment.
The amendment is pulled down. Senator Betancourt, you're recognized. Passage to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment of the committee substitute of Senate Bill 1970.
Any objection? Hearing none, bill passed to engrossment. You recognize suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 several days.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
29 ayes, 2 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1970. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1970 relating to the prosecution of certain criminal conduct involving reckless driving, exhibition, or racing on a highway.
You're recognized on final.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of the committee substitute of Senate Bill 1970.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
The bill passes 29-2. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members.
Senator Betancourt. Senator Campbell. Senator Springer, you're recognized. Suspend the intent calendar to the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business and the intent calendar to take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 471. The legislation attempts to free up TCQ investigators to investigate legitimate claims and relieve the burden of multiple investigations that result in no action. For example, 2 individuals filed 39 complaints in fiscal year 22 against the same asphalt operation, which resulted in no findings on any of the 39 complaints by TCEQ. From December 2019 to the present, the DFW Region Office has received approximately 44 complaints from 8 different citizens regarding a batch plant in Dallas, and none of these have resulted in any air violations. In the same time frame, one individual filed for more than 28 complaints against one landfill with no findings, and resulting in almost 15,000 total hours of investigation. The original bill had provisions that were objected to by the state, by stakeholders, and I took these to heart. The committee substitute modeled the system used by the federal and state courts for handling vexatious filers. The bill now states that TCEQ is not required to investigate certain complaints. These include complaints that can be addressed during other TCEQ activities and complaints that have low probability of being substantiated by TCEQ. The later includes complaints that are repetitive or redundant of other complaints from the same site and were investigated in the preceding 12 months and were substantiated by TCEQ, or complaints from a complainant who has filed at least 5 complaints in the preceding 7 years that were not substantiated by TCEQ. I want to thank Senator Johnson for working with me to be able to adjust that in the committee sub, and with that I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
28 ayes, 3 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 471.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 471 relating to the imposition of a fee by the relating to the investigation by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality of certain complaints.
You recognize passage on engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage of committee substitute to Senate Bill 471.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton.
22 ayes and 9 nays. The bill passes to engrossment. You would need to find, do you have 3 to go? You're recognized on suspending the constitutional 3-day rule.
I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 several days.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
28 ayes, 3 nays. Rules suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 471. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 471 relating to the investigation by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality of certain complaints.
You're recognized on final.
Thank you, Mr. President and members, and I move final passage to committee substitute for Senate Bill 471.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
22 ayes, 9 nays. Bill is finally passed with teamwork. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank members. Senator Campbell, we're ready for you. Senator Campbell, you're recognized. On Senate Bill 2368, suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2368. Members, as many of you know, we've got almost 1,200, over 1,200, about 1,208 independent school districts. About 500 of these have less than 500 children. Today, and I'm saying that because some school districts have adopted a 4-day school week to strike a balance between educational opportunities for children and advantages for school. This bill maintains the 5-day school week. And with that, Mr. President, I've moved to suspend.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
24 ayes, 7 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading. Senate Bill 2368. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 2368, relating the minimum number of instructional days provided by public schools.
We need to hold 1 moment for that change in that amendment. 1 moment.
Sounds good.
I've got a school district who's I'm not going to talk to them. They need your help.
Members, there is an amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment Number 1 by Nichols.
Senator Nichols, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment does two things. At the bottom of the page, it basically says if you currently or you're a school district and did a 4-day week in 22 or 23 school year that you're grandfathered in. And then the second thing it does is in the middle where it raises it to exempt out schools that have enrollment of less than 7,000 students. What it does.
Senator Campbell on the amendment.
I accept this amendment. The districts that testified before our committee in favor of a 4-day school week had a lower student population, so I agree there are variables that are likely easier to control for success at the smaller school districts rather than the big or the mid-sized school districts. So I do accept this amendment.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Any objection to the amendment? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Thank you, Senator Nichols, for working with Senator Campbell. Senator Campbell, you recognize passage to engrossment.
I move passage to engrossment.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
24 ayes and 7 nays. The bill passes to engrossment. If you can find one person to suspend for you. Do you have it? Secretary will, you have to make a motion for constitutional 3-day rule.
I do move to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
26 ayes, 5 nays. Rule suspended. Chair lays out in third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 2368. Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2368, relating the minimum number of instructional days provided by public schools.
You're recognized on final passage.
I move final passage.
Secretary will call the roll when ready.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
25 ayes, 6 nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you for all your hard work on this, Senator.
Thank you,
and the
Mr.
team.
President. And I want to thank the members for making this a strong bipartisan bill vote. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Senator Middleton is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1705.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business, take up and consider committee substitute for Senate Bill 1705. And this is the bill that requires parties that get more than 2% of the statewide vote to conduct a primary. And I move suspension.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckert.
18 ayes and 13 nays. The rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 1705. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute, Senate Bill 1705, relating to nominations by primary election by certain political parties.
Chair recognizes Senator Eckhart on final passage.
Let's see if it, there we go, there we go. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Members of the chamber, we've already passed more than 20 election bills this session, creating more barriers, hoops, and punishments in elections. Earlier today, we even passed a bill to forum shop on prosecution of elections. We have several more of these election bills to come. We did redistricting, again, a do-over of redistricting earlier this session. And it is frankly now old news, drawing districts to favor the party in power, making it difficult and frightening for supporters of the opposing party to vote. We've done so much of this that I don't even think that the press corps that's probably up in the gallery is even paying any attention anymore, because it's become so much the air that we breathe. But what is new this session, so newsflash those up in the gallery who work for the press corps, this is new. Cracking down on third-party candidates. That's new. We Texans have always had an independent streak. The UT Politics Project puts the percentage of independent voters at a pretty consistent 11% since 2016. And independent voters tend to be younger than Republican voters and more conservative than Democratic voters. So in the past election cycles, candidates from both major parties banked on most independent voters either skipping the election entirely or voting for the Republican because it was the more conservative choice on the ballot. But I'm going to put this question to y'all, if you're listening. What does it mean to be a conservative anymore? What does conservative mean? When so-called conservatives are advocating policies where government intrudes into the boardroom, where your state government intrudes into the bedroom, where your state government is intruding into your medical examining room. Is that conservative? So with the rise of government intrusion into our private lives, the hyperpolarization between the two major parties, and the winner-take-all tactics of the current majority, there's a growing national interest in third-party candidates. There's a growing desire to see more choices on the ballot, whether through ranked choice voting or through third-party candidates from the Green Party or the Libertarian Party or the Forward Party, which includes both Republican and Democratic former elected officials, and had its convention in Houston last year. I believe this bill and others like it that have been filed this session are motivated by the fear that the growing interest in independent and third-party candidates is a threat to the Republican majority in the state. Since the Republican Party is in control of the state government, they're shutting down third parties through legislation like this one. Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution requires that states must have a Republican form of government. But I'm afraid some in this chamber have misunderstood that phrase to require a Republican Party form of government. Having more choices on the ballot informs the debate and brings us closer together. It elevates the middle. But silencing the middle keeps us divided. And for that reason, I'm voting no on this bill.
Senator Middleton's recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move final passage on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1705, which increases voter input, especially through, I believe, our joint primary election process. This doesn't decrease voter input, it increases it. With that, I move final passage.
Senator Middleton moves final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 1705. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bardwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
17 ayes, 14 nays. Bill passes. Thank you. Senator Hughes, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend Senate Rule 1113 and the posting rules to allow the Senate Committee on State Affairs to meet while the Senate's in session immediately to vote on one pending bill, Senate Bill 1979, in the press room immediately should the Senate grant the motion.
Members, is there objection? Hearing none. Motion is adopted.
Mr. President, is it necessary for me to announce that the Senate Committee on State Affairs is meeting immediately in the press room?
If you want to, Senator.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members.
Senator Betancourt recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2038.
Thank you, Mr. President. The current law does not provide a process to allow property owners to choose to be released from municipal extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ. In 2019, legislature reformed municipal annexation, and in doing so, the ETJ became significantly less relevant. Cities no longer use ETJ to plan for future annexations. Annexations are requested if landowners wish to be annexed. At this point in time, where cities don't provide services in ETJ, however, cities do impose regulation. City councils are regulating residents with have no ability to vote for them. And Senate Bill 2038 provides that the missing accountability by allowing residents and property owners to use petition election procedures based on population to remove themselves from a city ETJ. We sent out a 4 substitute last night for everyone to review, and I'll be moving adoption of that as floor amendment number 1. With that, I move suspension of regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 2038.
Senator Betancourt moves. Senator Eckhart, you're recognized. For what purpose?
To ask questions of the author, please.
Do you yield, Senator Betancourt?
Sure.
Once I find the bill book. My apologies.
Senator Eckhart, you might want to look at the amendment because that's the floor amendment number 1 is what has all the new bill itself.
And you're absolutely right. So I do not have questions on this. My apologies.
All right. Thank you.
Senator Betcourt moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2038. The Secretary call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Florida, Scoot.
20 ayes and 11 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 2038. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 2038, relating to release of an area from a municipality's extraterritorial jurisdiction by petition or election.
There is an amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Bettencourt.
Senator Bettencourt, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. The floor substitute for Senate Bill 2038 was emailed to all the offices last night. Amendment makes exceptions so the bill would not apply to active military bases, any area that's designated as an industrial district under Section 42.044 of the Local Government Code, any area that's subject to currently existing strategic partnership under Local Government Code 43.0751 will continue to be honored. These areas would stay in the ETJ. If petitioners ask for an election, the city can avoid the cost of election by deciding to voluntarily release the area from ETJ without an election. The bill provides that if the election fails, the petitioners can't ask for another election for now under this amendment 2 years. The bill clarifies that a petition or election results in the area being removed from the ETJ and the city doesn't file the papers to remove it. The removal happens automatically. The bill requires the city to notify petitioners of the results of petition election in a certain open-ended period of time. It's filed, left it open-ended. The amendment provides that new annexations after January 1st do not extend the ETJ to new territories unless the property owners in the new territory want to be included. And finally, if the area is removed, is subject to an agreement between the city and the county that states which of them regulates the subdivisions. The agreement is ended and the county will regulate the subdivisions. With that, the amendment is acceptable. The author and I move adoption.
Senator Bettencourt moves adoption of the amendment. Any objections? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Bettencourt is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage of the engrossment of Senate Bill 2038.
Senator Bettencourt moves passage to engrossment. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
20 ayes and 11 nays. The bill is passed to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
And we'll hold right there, Senator. Senator Bettencourt. Senator Bettencourt is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1581.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Texas could join 29 other states that have some form of mandate review to process carefully the review of full impact mandates on business families, health care costs, health needs, and those states assist lawmakers with the information they need to make informed decisions. The committee substitute Senate Bill 1581 creates the Texas Health Insurance Mandate Advisory Collaborative at the University of Texas Science Center in Houston to prepare analysis of bill proposals that would impose new mandates on health benefit issuers in the state. The center will take requests from the legislature year-round and legislative is not in session. However, the collaborative may not look at past legislation that has already been passed. The collaborative will take requests from the Lieutenant Governor, Speaker of the House, the chair of appropriate committees. However, there's no requirement in the bill for legislative proposal to go through this process. It currently has a 60-day review period. I'm going to have an amendment that reduces that to 45 days, and we're also going to specifically talk about the areas in another amendment of what they should be looking at. So with that, I move to take up and consider suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider committee substitute to Senate Bill 1581.
Senator Betancourt moves suspension of the regular order of business on the committee substitute for Senate Bill 1581. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
18 ayes and 13 nays. The rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 1581. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1581 relating to the establishment of the Texas Health Insurance Mandate Advisory Collaborative.
The following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Betancourt.
Senator Betancourt to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is one of the floor amendments I talked about. This amendment will improve the bill by requiring an examination of the impact of proposed legislation on overall health care of Texans. Specifically, the mandate is expected to reduce incidents of premature death, economic loss associated with disease, health care benefit plans offered in the state currently have denied access to a relevant benefit or service. And I believe it's a balanced view that with the stakeholders agreement, I offer adoption of floor amendment number 1.
Senator Eckhart, for what purpose?
To ask questions of the author on the amendment.
Senator Betancourt, do you yield?
Sure, please do.
Thanks so much, Senator Betancourt, for this amendment. And I noted in your layout of the bill, 29 other states have an entity like this to take a look at a cost-benefit analysis of these mandates. I have a question on those 29 other states. How many of those other states are full-time legislatures versus part-time legislatures? Do you know?
I believe the number of part-time legislators is down to less than 6, or is it 8? So obviously the majority of them would be full-time legislators.
And I believe that's going to come up in one of your other amendments. But I wanted to go to this particular amendment because I noted in the bill as filed, you and I both agree what gets measured gets fixed.
Correct.
And when you are looking at outcomes, you want to take a look at inputs and performance. What we're after here is outcomes, not just the input and outgo, correct?
That's correct. You want to try to do a full function analysis.
So a full function analysis, one thing that was concerning about the bill as filed is that the relevant nouns that were being analyzed were spending, expense, and utilization.
Well,
and so I didn't see things like medical outcome, infant mortality, the kind of outcome measures that one might expect.
Well, I think in the amendment it talks about incidences of premature death, and I think that would be covered. That would cover what you just asked for.
So, and I do appreciate that in the amendment. It does cover premature death, but that appears to be the only medical outcome measure that's required by the bill.
I think that when you look at what the broader view of what economic loss associated with disease, and also you looked at a broader view of what the healthcare plans would be talking about with access to a relevant benefit or service, you would cast a pretty wide net with those two.
Yes. A concern I have with the bill is that even with the amendment, with the exception of premature death, we're only measuring the success based in economic terms. How much does it cost? How much does it save? Without any indicators of medical outcome improvements.
Well, without an extended discussion, the bill has a long way to go, so we can certainly continue the discussion from this point. But I know you had looked at a couple amendments yourself that were in the vein of both these. I think this one would have been, you would have had expanded more categories. So I think this is a good start because you have to recognize the obvious, and you start with premature deaths and then the other two that we just listed. I think that gets us started, and we'll see where it takes us in this legislative journey, quite frankly.
Thank you for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Senator Bettencourt, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move adoption of floor amendment number 1.
Senator Bettencourt moves adoption of the amendment. Is there any objection? Hearing none, amendment is adopted. Members, there is an amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 2 by Bettencourt.
Senator Bettencourt, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This was the aforementioned amendment that reduced the time that the collaborative would be able to produce a report in the legislative session to 45 days from 60. I move adoption of floor amendment number 2.
Senator Eckhart.
Again, a question of the author on the amendment.
Senator Bettencourt, do you yield?
Sure.
This goes back to our discussion about the number of other states that have this board and whether or not they have a full-time legislature. Since we agree that the majority of them will be full-time legislatures, the equivalent in other states have shorter time frames. And if they don't have shorter time frames, they meet year-round, which makes a 45-day or even a 60-day manageable. Since we have such a truncated period of time within which to operate, is 45 days the minimum that we could get? Because my fear is that this board will not be at its maximum utilization if there's a 45-day turnaround from request.
Well, I think that Senator Eckhart, you had come up with an idea about a lower time period. We checked with the collaborative, and again, this is no cost to the state, so we're plowing back this money back into the collaborative to do the work. They said they could not do a 30-day time frame, but remember, we're starting from scratch. So once this process gets started, then we can see about in future reducing that time period. But the important part is that we are shortening the time from 60 to 45 as a recognition of the session. Hopefully we'll have some discussion in advance of the session because that's when you actually can figure out better what gets measured gets fixed.
Thank you for answering my questions.
No, anytime.
Senator Bettencourt, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of floor amendment number 2.
Senator Bettencourt moves adoption of amendment number 2. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Bettencourt is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage and engrossment of the committee substitute of Senate Bill 1581.
Senator Bettencourt moves passage to engrossment. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez.
18 ayes and 13 nays. The bill is passed to engrossment. And we will hold there, Senator.
These aren't my amendments. That's right.
Motion in writing, permission to introduce. Mr. President, I move suspension of Senate Rule 7.07B to permit the introduction of the following bill, Senate Bill 2620 by Springer.
Is there objection to the motion? Hearing none. The motion is adopted. Following bills and resolutions on first reading and reference to committee, the Secretary will read the bills and resolutions.
Senate Bill 2618 by Creighton relating to the powers, duties, territory, and governance of the Westwood Magnolia Parkway Improvement District to local government. Senate Bill 2619 by Creighton relating to the powers and duties of the Stanley Lake Municipal Utility District to local government. Senate Bill 2620 by Springer relating to authorizing certain political subdivisions to change the date on which a general election for officers is held to state affairs. House Bill 63 to Health and Human Services, House Bill 98 to Education, House Bill 185 to Education, House Bill 290 to Health and Human Services, House Bill 623 to Local Government, House Bill 679 to Business and Commerce, House Bill 683 to the Subcommittee on Higher Education, House Bill 833 to Local Government, House Bill 964 to Criminal Justice, House Bill 1114 to the Subcommittee on Higher Education, House Bill 1242 to Natural Resources and Economic Development, House Bill 1275 to Transportation, House Bill 1363 to Business and Commerce, House Bill 1636 to the Subcommittee on Higher Education, House Bill 1761 to Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs, House Bill 1989 to Local Government, House Bill 2071 to Local Government, House Bill 2194 to Business and Commerce, House Bill 2453 to Business and Commerce, House Bill 2459 to Natural Resources and Economic Development, House Bill 2460 to Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs, House Bill 2466 to Natural Resources and Economic Development, House Bill 2544 to Health and Human Services, House Bill 2574 to Business and Commerce, House Bill 2664 to Administration, House Bill 2871 to the Subcommittee on Higher Education, House Bill 2891 to Education, House Bill 3053 to Local Government, House Bill 3125 to Transportation, House Bill 3993 to the Subcommittee on Higher Education.
Senator Bettencourt is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the constitutional rule that bills be read on 3 several days.
Senator Bettencourt moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Nessler.
25 ayes and 6 nays. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 2038. The Secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2038 relating the release of an area from a municipality's extraterritorial jurisdiction by petition or election.
Senator Bettencourt, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of Senate Bill 2038.
Senator Bettencourt moves final passage of Senate Bill 2038. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Creighton, Eckhart.
20 ayes and 11 nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members.
The President's desk is clear. Are there any announcements? Chair recognizes the Dean of the Senate for a highly privileged motion. Senator Betancourt.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Local Government will be meeting in the Betty King Room 15 minutes upon adjournment to vote out bills and to also handle pending business. So I need all the members. On the advice of great thought and great minds, we're going to meet immediately in the Betty King Room upon adjournment.
Senator.
Mr. President, members, I suspend Senate Rules 1110, 1118, so the Senate Committee on Local Government continue our hearing today, Thursday, April 27th, immediately upon adjournment of the Betty King Room, 2E20F. We've changed our hearing location for our votes. Thank you, Mr. President. If there's no objection, I move suspension.
Senator Betancourt moves adoption. Any objection? Hearing none.
Thank
Senator
you,
Campbell,
Mr. President, members.
You are recognized.
Thank you.
Senator Campbell, you're recognized.
I move to suspend the 24-hour posting rule so the Senate Committee on Education can meet today at the rail.
Which rail?
This rail right here, Senator West, the brass bell rail. And to take up and consider some business and education. With that, I move suspension if there's no further comments.
Senator Campbell moves suspension. Any objection? Hearing none. The motion is adopted. Chair recognizes the Dean of the Senate for a highly privileged motion.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate adjourn until 11 a.m. Monday, May 1st, pending the receipt of committee reports.
Is there objection? The chair hears none. The Senate stands adjourned until 11 a.m. Monday, May the 1st, pending the receipt of committee reports.